Good morning, guys. The purpose of this movie is to walk you through the role of the United States as a superpower in the 19th and 20th centuries. I highly recommend as we go through this that you have your notes out for that marking period exam question number 15, I believe it is, for defense, and also think about ways that you can include some of these thoughts into your defense presentations you're working on now. The first thing we need to look at is what the heck a superpower is. If you did your work this weekend, you have seen this quote. A superpower is a country that tries to dominate the world fairs. And I really like Lyman Miller's definition because it looks at superpowers in four ways: in military, economic, political, and cultural ways. Now we need to reverse and go back to the mid 1800s, the 19th century in US history, to figure out the times where the United States started exerting its power. All right, how much do you remember from 7th grade US history? Mr. Wolf and I wanted to go back to an example hopefully you remember. In the mid 1800s, the United States and Mexico go to war. You can see some of the details here, but this is a very important war where the United States starts preparing itself on the world stage. Look at some of the details. All of the underlined words in this keynote will be links, and I'll provide you the keynote so you can see it and click on some of them yourself. I'm not so interested in the details of the Mexican War as I am what happened. If you go back to Lyman Miller's definition of what makes a superpower, political and military are two components that make up that. Well, the United States gained a lot of land and exerted our military and really defeated the Mexicans during this war. But what you might be missing is how much economic gain the United States picked up. In Tyndale and Shee's American History, they point out that the American Southwest and Texas had a lot to gain. The United States had a lot to gain from picking up these territories. In Texas, there are a lot of oil reserves. In the American Southwest, there's a lot of gold and silver deposits. The United States perhaps picked up the greatest wealth transfer from any war in any history of the world because of the Mexican War and the land that we gained. Another 19th century war that exerts the United States' influence is the Spanish-American War. Again, you can pick up some of the details, pause the video if you need, and remind yourself of what goes on, but this is another opportunity for the United States to exert our power and become a world player, this time against Spain. The Spanish-American War perhaps set the United States up best for imperialism, or spreading around the world and seeking political influence in other regions in other countries. Going to war against the Spanish Empire brought the United States a lot of territory around the equator, stretched across the world. Cuba, Puerto Rico, yes, but also the Philippines and Guam and Hawaii. If you look at their significance upcoming in World War II especially, these are very significant acquisitions for the United States and helped develop the United States into a world power. World wars really amplified the United States' role as a superpower. Now, World War I, the United States was not involved in until 1917. Again, I want to remind you, the details on the slide, take some notes if you feel like you need to. In the keynote, if you want to click on some of these ideas, please do. The United States did not get involved in World War I until 1917, when President Woodrow Wilson thought that we needed to make the world safe for democracy. Some of our citizens were being killed on merchant boats that were carrying goods to Europe, the RMS Lusitania being a very famous example. But there's this really odd conceived notion that Germany was going to ask Mexico to attack the United States. We found out about this message through the Zimmerman telegram, and the United States got involved in World War I. I don't know why I felt the need to put the map in here, but I really think it's important that you understand the empires of old Europe. You can see the German, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman Empire, called the Central Powers during World War I, for hopefully obvious reasons. And then the Russian Empire, France, Italy, and Great Britain, which were Allied powers, and the United States also then joined in 1917. It's not World War I that fascinates me, though. It's what happens after World War I that really sets the United States up as a world power. In September of 1919, Woodrow Wilson goes to Paris and is given parades in his honor, and called the Prince of Peace. That's not a title that gets thrown around lightly. According to the Bible, Jesus is called the Prince of Peace for many Christians. So here they are equating Woodrow Wilson as their savior, for getting them out of World War I. President Wilson goes to the Paris Peace Conference and tries to come up with a plan for peace called the 14 Points. Now this is really going to set the United States apart on the world stage. There are major goals, as you can see, that are outlined, but the United States doesn't really get what we want. Only one of the 14 points ever gets agreed upon, and that point isn't even ratified by the United States. The League of Nations was the only thing that came out of the 14 points that everyone seemed to agree on. It was the precursor to the United Nations, and the United States Senate didn't ratify it. We didn't want to be involved in an international organization. We didn't want to be governed by that. So, oddly enough, the 14 points put us on the world stage, but it really shaped our relations with other countries. Now, I hope you're ready for the biggest oversimplification of World War II ever. Between World War I and World War II, the United States sought to stay out of everyone's business, but it didn't work. In 1939, in the 1930s, Germany became aggressive, and in 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Great Britain and France declare war on Germany. The United States doesn't want any part. Italy, Germany, and Japan all form a tripartite alliance. The United States doesn't get involved in the war until December 7th, 1941, when Pearl Harbor is attacked. There's a lot of details that are involved. The United States ends the war. Germany surrenders to the United States in the spring of 1945, and then the United States drops an atomic bomb on Japan in August-September of 1945, and the war is over. It's not so much what happens during the war as what happens after that's very significant. I guess I should say it's not significant anyway for the goal of our PowerPoint, which is to look at the United States as a world power, as a global superpower. There's a lot of significant things that go on during the war. But as a superpower, the United States and Russia are the only two countries left after World War II that have any strength to govern world affairs. And you can see this quote again by Lina Miller, that we're going to succeed the rest of the world Great Britain as the world's next great superpower. If we think about political, military, economic, and social ways the United States is going to shape the world, we have now established ourselves militarily, bar none. We start looking about the way the United States positions itself, and again, in the keynote that I'm going to provide, all these underlying things are links if you don't know what they are. But economically, the United States is going to help countries around the world rebuild after World War II with the Marshall Plan. We supplied money to all of Europe. We gave and rebuilt Japan after the war. We helped our enemies grow again, and eventually they actually became allies. We also prepared ourselves militarily with something called NATO, and the United States really started setting up a worldwide system that we're going to be the next great superpower. The only person that was going to try to stop us, or the only country, would be Russia. So after World War II, Russia and the United States are left as the two remaining superpowers. For 46 years, the United States and Russia engage in something called the Cold War. I really like this quote by Tyndale Shi because the Cold War isn't straightforward. It's an ideological struggle, a political struggle between the United States and Russia that never really resulted in a head-to-head conflict anywhere. So what were some of the things that were going on during the Cold War? Again, all these underlined items on my timeline here are all links. You can click through to. I found some scholarly websites for you to look at if you're curious. There are major Cold War conflicts. In each one of these conflicts, the United States doesn't go to war directly with the Russians, but the United States sides with one side at war and the Russians side with another. And in each one of these events, the United States pushes forward a little bit the ideological struggle, and in some cases wins some and loses some events which shape us as a world power. But very clearly, militarily and politically, the United States is establishing itself in the 20th century as a world superpower. Here's where things are going to get a bit tricky. Since the end of the Cold War, the United States got involved in several other things that helped shape us as a world power. I tried to group them by region or by topic, but keep in mind the marking period 3 exam question is about the 19th and 20th centuries, so only things ending with 1999 would fit that question. But in the Middle East, the United States is involved in the Persian Gulf conflict. That is one of our topics that we're going to look at in the defense project that we're doing, also with the Iraq War. We know all too well about the 9/11 attacks and the way the United States is shaped by the global war on terror, but we're also pulled into humanitarian crises and nuclear crises as we started looking at the other day. So after World War II and the Cold War are over, our role as a superpower is really dynamically changing into the 21st century. Okay, so I know we're at the 10-minute mark, a little over the 10-minute mark, and that's about all the longer I intended it on this being. But I need you to think about the two reasons why we did this. I want you to go back through this keynote, this recorded keynote, this YouTube video, and think about the role of the United States as a global superpower in the 20th and 21st centuries, or the 19th and 20th centuries. You need to be able to describe that for an upcoming marking period 3 exam question. Take the time with this video, go back to the keynote, and pull some key details. Notice I footnoted wherever I could to help you out with that. Second piece that's really important is I want you to think about how the United States' role as a global superpower affected our ability or our need to internationally provide for our common defense. Those two pieces are really intertwined, and to understand the one helps you understand the other. So pause the video, open up the keynote, go back through and find details for those two concepts. And if you've made it this far, here are the two major sources I drew my ideas from, but I really tried to also include footnotes for the images I used and links that go out to scholarly websites. And the last thing I'll leave you with, if you've made it this far, is a really corny joke. What do you call a fake noodle? An impasta. Thanks guys, have a great day.